Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Not a Scooby Podcast. Today we are joined by Sarah Livingston, who is the brand strategist at Flair Airlines. Previously, she also has a great deal of experience in copywriting, and even before that, she was an AI tutor. So in this week's episode, we talk about style guides, what they are. They're sort of brand Bibles, something that you should hand out to all of your team members to create a consistent brand identity throughout all the content that you publish. Additionally, we talk about copywriting in general, how a certain brand may speak differently to others, something that I really know very little about, so it was great to talk about that. And finally, the impact AI has on Sarah's workflow. She's actually done a great job of implementing AI. However, she also, with her background in education of AI tutoring, she's able to highlight some considerations that we should make before necessarily giving a bunch of information, private documents to a large language model, things that really should be considered before taking any step with AI. So there's a lot to talk about. I think if you don't know a lot about copywriting or brand strategy in general, what really is a brand, I think there's a lot of value for you in this episode, because I learned a lot and I hope you do too. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the episode and I hope you enjoy. Hi Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Not a Scooby Podcast. Let's just jump straight into things with my first question. That is, what is a style guide?
Yeah, thanks for having me. A style guide is something that a brand strategist like myself would put together, which includes grammar, syntax, any kind of rules that a company needs to follow in their copy. So not just marketing copy, across any touch point that your brand has. It's got spelling conventions, what words you use, how do you call certain things. So what do you call your customers? What do you call your products? It's basically a full Bible of how you say what you say as a brand.
And how would that maybe differ, say, when it comes to grammar, given that there's already a particular way of doing grammar? How would that necessarily change from brand to brand?
A lot of it is a style preference. So, for example, if you want to use a dash, you could use an M dash with no spaces between words, or you could use an N dash with spaces between words. It's mostly a preference. So, it's important to just choose one and stay consistent with it so that you don't look sloppy in your copy. It also depends on the country that you're in. It can differ depending on where you are. So in Canada here, we have a little bit different compared to American rules. And so that's one of the things that we often call out in style guides here. So make sure that you're spelling things the Canadian way, which is pretty much the same way as British English, but just a tiny little bit different. So a style guide would capture all of those little nuances.
Nice. You can tell you're a copywriter because sloppy in your copy already seems like a sort of slogan. So is that essential for every business to have, small, large? Is that something that you think people should be doing from day one? Is let's establish our style guide or sort of Bible to refer to?
Yeah, I do think it's a pretty foundational thing. The earlier you have it, the better. It makes it easier to onboard people to your team as well. You can be like, here's how we write, follow this. You don't have to kind of let people take things their own way. It just helps rein in the brand. And it really helps with keeping it consistent and then also building that brand trust and affinity by being consistent and not sloppy.
So building trust as a brand, particularly online, I think more now than ever, it's fair to say that people are hesitant to trust what they see online, and particularly businesses. I find it's quite easy nowadays to present yourself as quite a successful, well polished business, and it turns out it's some guy who's just
Mm.
a really good web developer, and he's been able to really polish this website. So how does copy then apply to building trust, and how does that work? As you said, the consistency is so important.
Yeah, I think it is that consistency. So making sure that you are taking that extra care to look professional and polished while also using tone to sound relatable and approachable. I think there were a lot of brands that probably used to go for this unattainable, like luxury kind of vibe in their tone. But I think a lot more brands nowadays are trying to have connections with their customers, trying to come off as approachable and relatable. And so I think the words that you use also are very important in building that trust. Being, especially if you're working for like a customer oriented business, being empathetic and understanding the problem instead of just writing what will be good for like SEO. Obviously, that's also important, but yeah.
So does that consistency apply to all platforms? For example, social media, TikTok, Instagram, very casual playgrounds, opposed to the homepage of your website. Is there a bit of flexibility with, oh, when you're on TikTok, when you're posting a meme related to Spider-Man, is there flexibility there to be a bit more casual, a bit more fun?
Yeah, definitely. I think social media is kind of do whatever you think works and keep going with what works. It's a great place to try things with your brand that you wouldn't try on your homepage. And then if that resonates, then kind of move it into the larger brand if it makes sense. But I think definitely there are like sub style guides for different areas. Same thing with customer service. It's not always going to be like fun and happy. You need to make sure you're a little bit more like empathetic and understanding, which you wouldn't be as much on social media. So it's definitely about reading the tone of the situation that you're in and writing separate rules for the little different situations that come up in your business.
And whose responsibility is it to determine that style across the board? As you said off camera, you don't necessarily spend too much time, say, literally posting on the social platforms. But is it still yourself that's designing and creating those style guides across the board for every nook and cranny?
Yeah. Yeah, it usually comes from like not just myself. In my case, I work with a creative team, but that's like my main focus. So, working with that team to distribute the style guide across the entire company so that even like operations knows how to speak, customer service knows how to speak, and obviously taking feedback from them too. I mean, they know how to speak to customers, but yeah, I guess it starts with the creative team.
When speaking to customers, is that sort of, are they reading a script that you've sort of prepared, or is it more sort of honed in a private space? You're just learning the right words to use, or is there very specific? If this is the question, this is how you answer it, and you don't deviate from this plan.
I think it can work both ways. It depends on your preference. I personally like giving more room for the person to be themselves, but kind of giving them like not so much a script if they want it, like it's there, but just like hit these main points. This is the purpose of this communication. This is what you want to convey. And then obviously put like some guardrails in. So, like, don't say this, avoid this word kind of thing, but let people have that more authentic connection. I'm not in customer service, so I don't know best, but that's my personal opinion.
And you mentioned SEO in copy. First off, for any listeners knowing, I say that as if I know what on earth SEO is. But can you give a brief description of SEO?
Yeah, it's search engine optimization. So, using the correct copy that would, not correct, but copy that would rank higher on Google's algorithm that I don't begin to understand, but using keywords that people would be searching for things that are related to your brand. Also, it's about like linking. So you make sure that you've linked other pages through across your website to make it stronger. So it definitely plays a part in when you're deciding what to write. You need to be mindful of what are people going to be searching for that will lead them to this page. And you want to make sure that wording is in preferably like the headers of your landing page, but make sure that it stays on topic.
And does that only apply to Google, or does that also now apply to social media? Because I feel like more and more people are actually using TikTok as a
Mhm.
alternative to Google.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not as well read on that topic, but it definitely, what you write in your caption does matter. And I know too on Instagram, they're focusing less on hashtags and more on like the content of the caption. So it's definitely something that you need to consider when you're doing social media as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm terrible at that. I'm terrible at it. I think mostly because I have a degree of probably too much confidence that I'm like, oh, I'm a good writer.
Mhm.
I can write something engaging. But is there a difference between, oh, that's nice to read, that's engaging, and that's actually good for SEO, for brand consistency? Because I'm terrible
Yeah.
at being consistent. I roll out of bed someday and I'm like, oh, let's just totally reshuffle and let's be a bit crazy, a bit brave. And then the next day I'm like, yeah, that was about
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so different from, like, how I feel like it used to be even a few years ago on social media, like, those things weren't things that we thought about, so I'm the same like, I don't do social media as much, I kind of do the overall strategy, but when I'm writing a caption, I'm like, "Oh god, what do I write?" It's definitely using captions in a different way than we used to.
So, as you said, you're sort of overseeing the style guide. When you've distributed that, how do you then keep an eye on it and make sure that it's actually being implemented the way it was intended to be?
I am going to plug a tool that I use. It's not sponsored, but Grammarly is amazing for that. So at my company, we just rolled out Grammarly. You can literally upload your entire style guide into Grammarly, and it will give customized reminders to people who are writing, like make sure you spell it this way, make sure you do this. I think it's incredibly powerful because otherwise I would have to read over everything, which is what I typically would do. And that's great, but it takes a lot of time. Obviously, it's not a replacement for proofreading, but it's a really powerful tool to help kind of keep that in check.
So, which I'm trying to make this as smooth as a transition as possible. Is Grammarly AI?
Yeah, they also have generative AI features, which is really cool because a lot of people have to write copy in their jobs, but they don't really know how to. So it is helpful to have that kind of tool for them to build off of. But obviously, it's not a replacement for entirely writing copy. You do have to kind of use your common sense to be like, does this actually make sense and say what I wanted to say? But I think it's super helpful.
This is maybe going to be a bit of a difficult question, particularly given that you yourself are a copywriter. Do you think, as you said, it's not a replacement? Is it not a replacement at the moment?
Yet. I think yet. Yeah. It's a little concerning how quickly it's becoming so fluent in like how to speak like a human. I want to think that it's going to be a tool that we use and not an entire replacement, but I can definitely see the worry.
And because I only know the most basic things about large language models and AI in general, but is our contributing to these softwares using them like Grammarly by sort of feeding it our information, is that then making the Grammarly itself smarter? So are we sort of contributing to how good it's getting so quickly by using them?
Yeah. that's how they learn. There's also a lot of like, I mean, I can't really speak on Grammarly in particular or any large language model in particular, but there's a lot of gray area about how they store that data as well. So it's another concerning thing. I know like it's probably not advisable to upload a confidential legal document into ChatGPT, but a lot of people do it, which is a bit concerning. But yeah.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I think AI in general, I'm incredibly excited about it because it is so exciting, and literally it feels like every day I go onto YouTube and I follow a few sort of leading AI channels, and
Mm-hmm.
there's just this new massive like game changer thing, DeepSeek, for example, just
Yeah.
shaking up seemingly the entire US by creating a side project and making it for seemingly a fraction of the cost of everyone else's budgets for large language models. So it is very interesting, but the ethical considerations, which I know you've touched on in your previous experience as an AI tutor.
Mm-hmm.
So what are those ethical considerations that we should be considering and applying to particularly creative work, whether it's copywriting or photography, video editing, etc.?
I think if you are using it as a tool for work, definitely use a model that has been vetted by your company, because I know that like you can have that written into a contract that they can't sell your data and that it's secure. I probably wouldn't just pop it into ChatGPT without checking on that. And I think just like common sense, like don't put anything sensitive in there. I mean, if you need to fill in parts later, like just use placeholders. I'm sure that's easy enough to do, but yeah, it's something that you need to kind of use your judgment for. Is this something that is highly confidential? I mean, we don't really know what is going to be done with this data at some point in the future. I'm sure lawyers would have really interesting views on this.
Mm. Yeah, I sometimes struggle bringing it up because it's obviously such a complicated subject, and
Yeah.
I'm just a guy. I don't.
I really just feel like no one knows. Like it's moving so quickly that people are just like, wow, like you said, you wake up and there's like a new like incredible feature that last week we hadn't even heard of. So
Mhm.
I don't know, like it's just gonna keep getting better and better and we'll see.
Yeah, the intellectual property just seems to have been blown out of the water. That as a concept, like you own something, no longer
Yeah.
seems to apply. And another thing, say OpenAI create ChatGPT, and then people generate no code software using ChatGPT in collaboration with something else. But they basically just converted ChatGPT into a different large language model that specializes in whatever it is that they've
Mhm.
made it specialize in, whether it's replying to text on a dating app or it's something more probably worthwhile. It's like, how does that work? Because you're basically just utilizing everything they've created and putting your name on it. Similarly with
Yeah,
logo generation or particularly images, it's like the AI can't generate it generates an image, it can't create something from nothing. So if I ask for a landscape of Scotland with a Highland cow in it, it's using and it's being heavily influenced by real photographers and real painters who have done that
yeah,
work and heavy lifting. And
yeah,
it's like, do I then own that?
yeah. I it's tricky. I think in the future, like there'll have to be more tools that can tell what's AI and what's not, but then we're also moving quickly towards a time where we can't tell the difference. Like it's gonna get better and better. And I really don't know. This like I think the same way about essays for like students in university. Um, And there's a lot of people who just chat GPT an essay, basically, and then just hand that in. And it's so easy to do. But I know the company that I did do AI tutoring with was part of a project that was training a model to be able to detect in academic writing AI usage. So those tools are being developed. I just don't know if they are going to be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And particularly more so from a business standpoint, I suppose, opposed to personal use. Do you feel like there should be a requirement to, say, if I post a video on Instagram through my business, should I then be saying that AI was used to create this video?
I mean, personally, I think yes. I know that on TikTok, I think there already is a tag that will come up if AI was used. And I think it auto generates based on like, I think it passes through some kind of a test, or you can disclose it. But I mean, there are always going to be times when it is not disclosed, and we need to use our judgment there.
Because one thing that I find particularly interesting, probably because this year I'm spending more and more time on camera, whether it's in podcasting or it's content creation, talking to camera, is the AI clones that you can
Mm,
now generate. I can feed Hey Jen or
yeah,
Synthesia 2 minutes of me talking to camera, and that's all it needs. And then
yeah,
I can just type, and it looks a bit weird and it doesn't really get it quite right. But it, for short form content, it does it well enough. If you added some B-roll, you wouldn't know the difference.
yeah,
There's a Indian content creator called Varun, and he was on a podcast recently, having created an AI clone and then generated his voice, his likeness with 11 Labs. And he now generates roughly 1,000 videos a month because he never has to turn the camera on. He
yeah,
never has
yeah,
to make sure his hair is all right before he presses record. He never stumbles over lines because he doesn't
yeah,
record any lines. And
yeah,
I obviously I watched that and I was like, damn, that's efficient. Like imagine if I never had to turn the camera on again. Because you're still making content. Like you're still writing the copy, you're still generating the B-roll, you're still doing all that stuff. But an element of it is obviously AI. And I suppose my question would be, if only an aspect of it is AI, say there's a clone of me that's on camera for 3 seconds, does that then make the whole video worthy of a big sticker that says this was created with AI? Because I feel like there's going to be, as much as there's people embracing AI, there's going to be, as there already is, a massive movement against it, a counter reaction to AI, where anything
mm,
that has a whiff of it, people are like, I'm not interested. I'm not going to give it any time. Like The Brutalist, for example, the Adrian Brody film, is getting a lot of
yeah.
stick for their, in their defense, minor use of AI, but they're getting a lot of negative feedback about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because on the other hand, with copy, people are always using AI to generate copy, and then they just, edit it, which I do quite often too. I'll kind of get it to spit out some ideas, and then I'll take them and kind of edit them. And if you were to put a tag on that as being AI generated, well, then everybody who does that with copy also should do that. So I feel like it's one of those things that will have to get used to being just part of the creative process. I do think there's like a line with it. So if you use almost entirely AI, then that's a different conversation. But in that case, I feel like you'd be using it as a creative tool. It's just so tricky. I mean, who knows?
Mm-hmm. And going back to the style guide, as you said, grammar. How is AI and the way AI writes influence the style guide? Because something I saw on LinkedIn recently, which I'm already guilty of, is people say
Mhm.
dashes.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
use a dash, that must be AI. If you use a bullet point and it ends with a comma, it must be AI. It's like, but people do write like that.
Mhm.
Like particularly the
Well,
dashes. I use the
yeah.
dashes. And did you then have to go back to the style guide and think, oh, we need to remove those dashes or people are going to think it's AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a way that AI writes at this stage. It's, like, almost always the same structure of sentence. It'll, like, list, like, 3 things, so it'll say, like, "From here to here, like, do this." Like, there are certain sentences that I always see come up. Um, and so I think that's why it's important to kind of edit a little bit and only use it as something that kinda jogs your brain into kinda thinking of new ideas or just, like, taking that and kinda making it your own. Because I find now I can usually tell when someone's using AI only, but if you just take, like, an extra minute and yeah, if you add a comma or kind of make it sound a little less robotic, it makes a difference, but in the future, it's gonna be a lot harder to do that. I think it will get better, it will kind of find different sentence structures and use them more often, and I think you can also kind of bake that into your style guide with AI style guide tools like Grammarly, because one of their features is you can teach it to write on brand. So you give it all of your brand tones, and then it will generate things for you in those tones with that grammar that you have loaded into it. So I do think it will learn how your brand speaks and then spit out something that your brand would say. But again, I would read it before just accepting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So to end, because I know you're actually got a working day ahead of you. Meanwhile, I'm going to go to bed very shortly. So to end, you mentioned Grammarly. Are there any other softwares that you've found particularly helpful?
I'm trying to think of any tools that I've used. I don't really use any tools.
No, that's cool.
Wish I had a better answer for you.
So good.
Grammarly is my, like, favorite tool. And then, yeah, just, like, I obviously have a look through social media. I monitor what's going on in my industry and in marketing in general. Love looking at LinkedIn, lots of good industry news on there. For project management, I use Notion. It's super customizable. I really like it. And also, you can, like, upload documents and store things in there, so I kinda have a knowledge base in there. But Grammarly now also has that feature, so might just switch over.
Sounds like everyone needs to get on Grammarly.
I love Grammarly.
Maybe you should be a sponsor. You know,
Yeah,
they'll
sponsor me,
hear this
please.
podcast and they think, damn, Sarah really likes what we're doing.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So we'll do an episode dedicated to Grammarly, a tutorial next time. So next up, for small business owners, what is the one marketing or copywriting component they should be focusing on? How should people be showing their brand consistently, and how do they establish that in the first place? Because I'm not consistent, like in my as an individual, as a human being, I am the least consistent person. One day I want to go
Mhm.
play tennis, the next day I hate tennis and I want to go play basketball. One day I like chicken, I no longer like chicken. Maybe a really bad example, but my point
How could you ever
being that,
not like chicken?
yeah, who doesn't like chicken? Sometimes I get absolutely sick of chicken. But yeah, a bit off topic. But hey, this is all me building my personal brand. People will never
Exactly.
buy me chicken now.
You're
Um,
relatable. Well, not relatable because if you don't like chicken, that's crazy.
so small business owners, small business owners, what is the one thing that they should do to have that brand consistency?
I would start by getting clear on your values and your mission. What helps for me is to write, like, a manifesto. So, like, what is your brand doing? Why are they doing it? And then, like, what are the 3 or 4 values that you want your brand to stand for? And then off of those values, what does that kind of for me, it helps to kind of personify your brand. So think of it as a person. If a person had those 3 values, like, what would they be like? So Would they be excited? Would they be empathetic? Would they be like personality and emotional traits to support those values? And then from there, you can kind of see how a person like that would talk. And so that's the process that I usually go through to create a brand voice. It's all
Yeah.
about like the one mission that you have. So as long as everything ladders back up to that mission, then it will make sense and it'll be consistent in everything you do.
Do any examples come to mind? Because I have the feeling that someone listening, and maybe me on some level, you say, "What's your mission?" And I'm like, "To make some money." And it's like, that's not much of a mission. Or at least one that you want to just have on your brand. It's just like, I'm just trying to make a living here.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples is IKEA. Their mission is all about creating a better everyday and affordable furniture for the many people. So their like obviously values of their brand are to be accessible, and they're literally everywhere, and they've got such a strong brand voice that like obviously they're there to make money, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like you're part of something bigger. You're part of this movement that like builds their own furniture and it takes pride in the things. So like you value the things that you buy from IKEA because you create them in a way. And so they're a brand that I really admire. They really lean into the finding solutions for people, and that's what they're selling instead of just selling like here's a dresser. They're very innovative with what they create. They're probably my favorite example, but there's lots of brands that are similar, like Apple is a good one. Innocent Smoothies, their brand voice is insane. If you have ever seen it, it's so good. They recently did a drink, I forget what the drink was called, but it was a drink that was supposed to help with like mental clarity and to make you like sharper. And so on the label of the drink, they like misspelled things purposely. They made it like kind of sloppy, and they were like, obviously our designers didn't have a drink of this drink. And it was so good. So yeah, just like those branding elements are so much more like emotional, and you can connect to them. That's what I really admire in a brand. And I'm like the ultimate consumer. I love branding. So when it like kind of made sense that I could kind of go this direction with my career, I was like, perfect. I feel like I want to understand why these brands are resonating with me so much, and I want to try to do that for other people.
Yeah, amazing. I think that is the perfect way to end this week's episode of the Not a Scooby podcast. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on this
Thank you
week's
for
episode.
having me. It was great to talk.